What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing more strange deaths in ufology. So everyone knows that throughout time there have been people who have died under strange and suspicious circumstances, right? Well, I did a video recently, like a few months ago, about journalists and other people who were either witness to or had some other connection to UFOs, or to so-called conspiracy theories, and the fact that they all died under very strange and suspicious, very mysterious circumstances. I actually found a whole slew of them, and I just can't believe that there's not more people talking about this. When I do videos like this, I imagine the loved ones and everyone that those people left behind. Do accidents happen? Sure they do. But how many accidents can happen to people who are all working or otherwise involved in the same area of work, research, or study before people start noticing and understanding that it can't possibly be an accident and it also cannot be a coincidence? I don't know what the answer to that question could possibly be, because for me, the last video was enough, but now I found even more cases. It's just shocking to me, and I feel like someone needs to be bringing this to the light, so it may as well be me. I'll leave the link of the other video I did about this in the description box if you want to check it out and catch up after you watch this one. You don't need to watch them in like any order. For now though, let's cuddle up with some tea or whatever makes you relaxed and look at some very bizarre deaths in ufology. So let's jump right in. So let's start off our list with a well-known and noted conspiracy theorist named Jim Keith, who died under extremely bizarre and dubious circumstances in September of 1999. Jim had his little accident when he was attending the Burning Man festival, but he had arrived a day before the festivities began in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada, which is just north of Reno, just to hang out and wait for the event to begin. Once the event began, Jim was on stage at the Burning Man festival, and he somehow fell off and hit the ground after losing his balance. At first, he thought he had just obtained some severe bruising on his legs, but by the next morning, he was in absolute agony. In fact, the pain he was in was so excruciating that he had to call for the paramedics, which were on hand for any accidents or things of that nature that happened at the festival, and they quickly arrived and took him to the WashU Medical Center in Reno for treatment. Once there, doctors told Jim that he had fractured his tibia and that he needed to be prepped for surgery, which would require him to be anesthetized. So everything seems fairly cut and dry up to this point, but it is about to get very strange. Once he was informed of this, Jim immediately placed a call to someone else that he knew who was in the field and business of conspiracy theories. The man's name was Gregory Pickard, and he said that Jim was in an absolute panic and sounded paranoid even to him. Jim told Gregory that one of the staff that had been helping him and who would be involved in the surgery had the same name as someone he had recently been debating the topic of black helicopters with, and it was as recently as just a few months earlier. He remembered the person, he remembered the name. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Jim Keith was debating with this person as to whether or not the black helicopters existed and what their purpose was regarding ufology conspiracy theories, because there are a lot. I do get a lot of requests to talk about the black helicopter situation, and I am currently working on something. So I think that was what he was debating. As the time the surgery neared, Jim became more and more anxious, and he told his nephew, Chris Davis, quote, "I have a feeling that if they put me under, I'm not coming back. I know if I get put under, I am going to die," end quote. That's exactly what happened, and it's said to have been a blood clot that eventually ended his life. And it happened during the surgery. He never came out of it. And it kind of has to make you wonder, at least in my opinion, if he was murdered or if it was just his own bad luck or some strange coincidence that he knew with absolute certainty what fate would befall him should he go through with that surgery. So some people have wondered why he didn't just call off the surgery or go to a different hospital, but I think he was in so much pain, he really didn't have many other options. Plus, I doubt anyone, maybe his friends in the conspiracy field with him, but I doubt anyone else really would have believed him if he continued to make noise about it and voice his concerns, as he did. Was Jim Keith murdered? Obviously, I don't know for sure, but that's just the thing, isn't it? It's always done in such a way that people can't ever prove it one way or another. I believe there's a good chance he was murdered, and in fact, I believe it to be more likely over it having been merely a coincidence. Other people in the field of conspiracy theories and the field as a whole, like everyone involved in it basically, at the time, found his death to be more than a little untimely and flat out labeled it as suspicious. They were very vocal in their questions about whether or not this was some tragic accident or a well-orchestrated murder by some random and still unknown culprits. In the immediate wake of his death, that question was asked the most by those who not only knew him, but by those who knew what he did for a living and the field of research he was involved in. There's a man named Greg Bishop who is considered a top authority in the UFO field who said about all of it, quote, "I would prefer to think that there was no connection to the weird computer problems," end quote. What he meant was, at the time he left for Burning Man in September of '99, there had been a series of hacks into Jim Keith's computer and another hack into his systems just a couple of days before he died as well. So what had he been investigating that the powers that be, and so it seems the hackers, were so interested in? Well, he was researching the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, which happened in France in 1997, and which people still question all these years later whether it was really as plain as a car accident or not. Did he uncover something that certain people in very high places didn't want being made known to the public? Of course it's possible, but we'll never know because there's been almost no mention of what happened to his personal files since he died. If I were to do a deep dive, I could probably answer that question, but for now, let's just move on to our next case. So instead of just one person, our next case involves a massive number of deaths, which mainly are connected. For many people, mainly those with involvement in this community, this one seems like an ultimate plotline for some sort of low-budget conspiracy theorist type thriller movie. There are dozens of scientists and technicians who are all working either together or separately, depending on each case, on highly classified programs which were all linked to one company. All of these people died under highly suspicious and equally bizarre circumstances, and this controversy ran for a very long time, too. It's said to have started in the early 70s and went right up until at least 1991, with it remaining completely unresolved to this very day. So, what exactly am I talking about here? Well, sometimes it's called the Marconi murders. The top secret work that was being done by a company called Marconi Electric Systems back then, and though it's still around today, it now exists as a part of BAE Systems Electronics Unlimited. The work this company does mainly revolves around futuristic weaponry and spy satellite technology. So, from what I understand, the first person to die that was a part of this company was a man named Robert Wilson. By 1971, Robert had built a very successful career for himself with the work he was doing for Marconi, specifically at its facility in Chelmsford, Essex, England, and as a technical author. Around this time as well, though, he was ready to move on, not only to new and different work and taking his work he had already done to the next level, but he also planned on taking it to a new company. One afternoon on a random and seemingly normal Sunday in 1972, Robert Wilson decided to finally get up into his attic at his house and just do some cleaning up. As he went through everything up in his attic, he became immediately alarmed when he discovered a very large box of files from his work at Marconi that he didn't remember having put up there. Like, he didn't know they were there. He was really worried, according to those who knew him best at the time, and he immediately called Marconi, telling them in no uncertain terms that he had no idea how the files had ended up there and that he wanted to just hand them back and be done with the whole situation. He didn't want to read through them, go through them. He didn't want to know how they got there. He just wanted to give them back and move on with his life. A major internal investigation was quickly launched by the company, and the company's security staff interviewed Wilson several times and for long lengths of time each time they spoke to him. By the end of it, it seemed as though, and at least that's what they were saying, that they believed him, that he had no memory of ever bringing those files home, let alone leaving them just sitting in a box in his attic, and that it was simply a case of him having made some sort of mistake, accidentally bringing them home with him, maybe when he cleaned out his office or something like that. I mean, just a little side note here, but why on earth would this man choose to bring home top secret files from a company he no longer worked for, but then turn himself in a year later for doing so, claiming amnesia? It just doesn't make sense to me, and it seemed at first like Marconi thought that way too. Less than 24 hours after the security team had seemingly accepted the simple explanation as the truth, it's alleged that Robert Wilson had accidentally shot himself in the chest while cleaning his gun. The weapon was a .45, but most people can't understand why or how someone with his experience in handling firearms and with how to handle them safely would be cleaning a loaded pistol with the weapon turned and facing directly at the center of his chest, of all places. Wilson didn't die, though, and he did speak about what happened. He seemed extremely confused about the entire situation. He himself said that he couldn't for the life of him understand how such a disastrous and unlikely thing could have ever happened to someone as careful as he had always been when cleaning or otherwise handling his guns. Many people said that when he discussed the incident, he seemed to suddenly be like he was in some sort of fog about it, and Robert said he got the chills when he thought of it at all. He was even a member at the local gun club, which made it even more unlikely that something like that could ever have happened to him by accident. The bullet missed his heart and all of his vital arteries, and though he survived, he wouldn't be alive for long. In May of 1973, Robert's body was found in his garage, and he was allegedly the victim of self-inflicted, albeit accidental, carbon monoxide poisoning. The death was ruled as accidental, and it was officially stated that he had been servicing his car and had been overwhelmed by carbon monoxide fumes while he did so. Let me ask you this. So some of my best friends are mechanics, and my husband is a master mechanic for nearly 50 years now. Who in the world or in their right mind services their car at all while the engine is running? Especially when they're in a small garage with all the windows and the bay doors closed. I don't know how to work on cars, and even I know not to do that. Yeah, I didn't think so. I'm not a mechanic, have no idea how to work on cars, and even I know that you don't do that. So if you're thinking along the lines of a conspiracy, I guess it would be that, just like with what we saw with Candy Jones last week, it's not uncommon or unheard of for certain government entities and powerful industry people to be able to make others do their bidding so that they aren't even connected to it. I believe Marconi was a company that was powerful enough to be able to do things just like that. And this isn't the only death associated with this company either, far from it. What I mean by Candy Jones is, did they mind control him and make him do it himself? Did they make him do it? You know, did they mind control him and make him shoot himself? That makes more sense to me than having some human assassin come in and leave no evidence behind at all. Because if the evidence suggests he accidentally shot himself and nothing else, that's what the evidence suggests. So did they do something to Robert Wilson, possibly by way of hypnotic suggestion, to get him to shoot himself, but when he failed, they had to think of something else? It would seem that way if you look at how confused Robert himself was about the whole shooting situation and how he was terrified of how it could have happened in the first place. What are the odds that twice in a year's time, a smart man, a scientist, would have two accidents that could be fatal? One with a gun that he luckily survived, and then one doing something so nonsensical as servicing his vehicle while the engine was on and the doors in the bays to the garage were closed. I'm not a betting woman, as I always say, but I wouldn't bet anything at all on the odds of that being what actually happened. However, I don't understand why they would be so upset and want to permanently silence the man when he came forward the moment he realized he had possession of those documents. I need to take this thought process a step further here, if you'll be so kind as to bear with me for a moment. So what if Robert was put under hypnosis and made to hide those files in his attic and didn't have any memory of it? And then once he found it, he didn't know how they had gotten there because his self was asleep when he had put them there in the first place. Again, if you don't know what I mean, please watch last week's video about Candy Jones and come back. So once he found them, he became a liability because I don't think he even knew, not consciously anyway, what were in those files. And when he found them and became aware of it, even though he was scared enough, or so it seemed, that he never would have talked about it, and I'm not even sure he even looked at what the files were, Marconi or whoever else couldn't risk the information getting out into the public, or that Robert would use the information at the new company he worked for, and so they offed him. Does that make sense? All of this is just my own speculation, guys, of course, and it's all alleged. And Marconi and no one who works for them has ever been officially named a suspect or been charged in any of these cases. Now, the deaths associated with this company in particular are more than numerous, and as I said earlier, I can't go over all of them with you here today, but as I said earlier as well, they've become known as the Marconi murders if you want to look it up and do your own research. I'll cover a few more, but know that this is so much more massive than just these few I'm discussing with you here today, and if you all want me to specifically talk about Marconi as a company back then and get into each and every death associated with them, allegedly, in detail, let me know in the comments, and I'll, of course, see what I can do. In March of 1982, 46-year-old Dr. Keith Bowden was a senior computer scientist who was at the time a contractor for GEC Marconi, which was Britain's major high-tech defense company, died in what was called a tragic and major car accident. One night, after attending some sort of social function that had nothing to do with his job, he drove his vehicle at a very high rate of speed off a major 3-lane highway and went headfirst off of a bridge down an embankment and then landed into an abandoned rail yard. He died instantly. So, the investigating officers at the time said that Keith had merely been drunk driving and driving too fast, losing control of the vehicle easily and dying as a result of a tragic accident. However, Keith's wife and their lawyer begged to differ. His wife and other friends who had been with him that night insisted that he had not been drinking at all, let alone that he had been so drunk he couldn't control his own vehicle. Keith's lawyer hired an independent accident investigator to go over the wreckage and find out what really happened. What he found was shocking, but still went mostly ignored as far as I could tell. So Keith was almost known for keeping the tires on his vehicle pristine and in great shape and condition as far as the independent investigator could find. That's what everyone said about him. Someone, though, seemed to have swapped his regular tires out for some old bald ones that would explain why he ended up with no control over the car in the first place. In March of 1985, a radar designer and draftsman with Marconi named Roger Hill allegedly shot himself to death in his house, and for as much as I searched and tried to bring you all more information as to why this one was sus, I couldn't find anything else except for what I just told you about this particular death. Just a few months after the Hill death, a digital communications expert who had worked at GEC and at British Telecom's Secret Research Centre, located in Martlesham Heath in Suffolk, England, a company that had strong ties to Marconi at the time, was also found dead when his body was found out on a sidewalk on an Ivory Coast West African hotel. He had a fatal fall when he either jumped, fell, or was pushed from the balcony of his room there. Just before his death, he had been telling his friends and family that he feared for his life and felt like someone had been stalking him, watching him and following him. And that's what made his death even more suspicious, and in the eyes of his loved ones and those who knew him best, even more reason it couldn't have been an accident or a case of him unaliving himself by jumping to his death. They believe he was pushed or thrown by someone having to do with Marconi over some sort of information he had knowledge of through working for and in communication with the same. But it's never been proven, and his death was left as undetermined, but only because the coroner couldn't figure out if it had been accidental or a purposeful fall. It's said by many familiar with the case that someone else being involved wasn't investigated at the time, but who knows if that's true. If everything we've learned so far is to be believed, though, then I would believe that statement as well. It just makes sense that the coroner would ignore it if higher-ups put pressure on him or her to do so. We've talked in other videos about the first United States Secretary of Defense and his strange and suspicious death from an alleged fall from his hospital room window on May 22, 1949 at exactly 1:50 a.m., and he was found shortly after on a third-floor canopy at the Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. So let's move on. From the last few months of the year 2000 until about mid-2005, an almost countless number of people who were employed in the elite field of microbiology died under very suspicious circumstances. For those of you who don't know, microbiology is defined as the study of organisms that are too small to be seen with the naked eye, such as bacteria and viruses. Some people within the media, and even some within certain forms of government, thought the deaths were highly suspicious, at least to some degree. At first, most of them seemed to be fairly straightforward, but even those who were skeptical of the idea that the deaths were suspicious in nature couldn't ignore the facts. there was one very important overriding factor in all of them, and that was that almost all of these microbiologists had top secret links to worldwide intelligence agencies and services, including the CIA in the United States, Britain's M15 and M16, and Israel's Mossad. It was almost inevitable that such a mysterious collection of deaths with such a tight-knit group of elite scientists in areas of very cutting-edge research would lead to speculation from people who are suspicious of so-called coincidences and who want to have the mystery solved for once and for all. Some people believe that a cell of deep-cover terrorists from the Middle East wiped all of the leading names in the field of microbiology out in an attempt to prevent the Western nations from developing ultimate biochemical weapons. A somewhat darker theory suggests that such weapons had already been developed, and because they had completed the top secret work, they needed to be eliminated, and so they were one by one. It's said in the same theory that the microbiologists were systematically killed by Western intelligence in an effort to prevent them from being kidnapped by terrorists who may have taken the information on how to make the weapons by force, or who would have forced them to come and work for them instead, thereby giving those same terrorists access to those same elite deadly weapons. Moving on to the summer of 2006, when a large crop circle appeared almost right next door to Chartley Castle, which is a centuries-old castle located in the English countryside of Staffordshire. It wasn't only the crop circles, though, and all around them, on the fringes of them, there were also extremely large piles of bright and beautiful peacock feathers. While the peacock feathers in the same spot as the crop circle was interesting and seemingly very odd, it didn't seem to be connected somehow. However, there were some people who did think it was connected, and according to one of them who wrote about it in the Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, they said, quote, "The peacock's tail is the emblem of the evil eye, or of an ever-vigilant traitor," end quote. So again, most of you are probably wondering, what the hell am I talking about? The story goes like this, quote, "Argus was the chief minister of Osiris, king of Egypt. When the king started on his Indian expedition, he left his queen, Isis, regent, and Argus was to be her chief advisor. Argus, with 100 spies called Eyes, soon made himself so powerful and formidable that he shut up the queen regent in a strong castle and proclaimed himself king. Mercury marched against him, took him prisoner, and cut off his head, whereupon Juno metamorphosed Argus into a peacock and set his eyes in its tail," end quote. So I got this information from an article Nick Redfern wrote for Mysterious Universe, and he said that he met a woman named Jane Addams, who is a devotee of Wicca and who Nick met in a Wiltshire crop circle in August of 1997. He said that he got to know Jane and that she told him that she had an intriguing theory for why there were seemingly always peacock feathers out of place in the United Kingdom, specifically surrounding crop circles. Are you guys still with me? Good, because I had a hard time hanging on there too, but it's really, really strange and well worth that twisted and somewhat convoluted ride. She obviously didn't give him this explanation about the peacock feathers at Chartley Castle in 1997 because that didn't happen until 2006, and that's where I got lost. I guess in 2006 he was talking to her, and here was her theory. She believes that the feathers were evidence that the people who are responsible for making the crop circles, or the entities, had been using the peacock's evil eye in what she described as, quote, black ceremonies, end of quote. She further stated that those types of ceremonies, the very same ones, had been conducted under the cover of night and darkness and on all sorts of different occasions, not only within British-made crop circles, but within ancient stone circles as well. Jane went even further in her claims and said that people involved in all of this dark ceremony stuff were doing it all in order to breed negativity and to invoke some seriously evil, life-threatening creatures from some sort of lower vibrational and sometimes demonic realm and dimensions that are connected to ours. So realms and dimensions, lower vibrational, oftentimes demonic, but also connected to ours somehow. So she said that some of these creatures that are being invoked or that have been invoked in the past are ones that look very similar to what we have come to know as Bigfoot, and that one had even been spotted at Chartley Castle by a man named Mark Dodds that came forward along with his wife to report having seen it in September of 1996. So they could use them in what she called, quote, psychic assassinations, end quote, of people who would oppose the dark and demonic activities of this group. This is a bit convoluted for me, and I had to keep going over the same information over and over again to really try to understand it. It's just like, I don't know, why would a secret organization who is doing all of this and practicing these rituals be worried about people opposing them? No one is supposed to know about them, right? Unless she meant that it was for people who knew about them and opposed them, and then they'd be at risk for exposure. That's more than likely what was meant, but since this isn't exactly what she said, I don't know. If you think this information is as bizarre as it gets even more insane, and you're not alone. Jane Addams told Nick Redfern, according to him in the article he wrote about it all, that she had personal knowledge, which he was sure to reiterate was the exact way she had said it, that these people use animals in ritualistic sacrifices at the stone circles. The one she personally knew of, quote unquote, was a ritual sacrifice, quote, near a stone circle near Devon, England, some time ago, end of quote. The purpose of the sacrifices was to conjure up a black cat and some creature that would definitely fit the exact description of a British Bigfoot from some lower vibrational ethereal underworld. The British Bigfoot, and to a lesser extent the cat, would then be charged with doing the group's bidding, which is a form of supernatural assassination by way of very precisely coordinated heart attacks. So what this tells us, if we believe it's all true, and I really, really do, is that these sort of controversial, seemingly conspiratorial, and oftentimes very suspicious and bizarre deaths are nothing new. And in fact, they have been happening for a very, very long time. And with that, my friends, I will leave you to your own research. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere. Spread the love, please, by sharing this video. Check out the description box for some important links, okay? I have a lot of books out now. I've been releasing book after book, starting with Danger at Your Door, Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids, the companion book to that, Midnight Visitors, and then Campfire 1 and 2, at the time you're going to be watching this, are up for pre-order on Amazon. The reason I was able to do them so quickly is because they're encounter stories, and people send me hundreds of encounters. You know, I was just able to get encounters in the woods. That's what Campfire Stories is all about, guys. Encounters with strange, demonic, lower vibrational, evil, strange, bizarre, weird entities, energies, even some UFO encounters, some shadow entity encounters, Bigfoot encounters, like you name it, it's in those books. And I want to make that a long series, but it depends on how well it sells. That's up to you guys. Also, if you buy any of my books, please be sure to rate and review them. 5-star ratings, please, if you guys can, if you feel it deserves that, and a great review on Amazon. That helps the author more than I think most people realize, because most people aren't writing books, right? How could you guys know that? Information on ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link. About the books too, guys, I will leave the links to every single one of my books, including the ones up for pre-order, in that description box. Kindle, paperback, and they're also available on Audible. I hope you enjoyed this short and to the point video. I've been trying to make them a little bit shorter because I feel like my average view duration is a lot shorter than as long as I make my videos, but they won't always be super duper short. And honestly, the length varies depending on how much information I have. Check out the description box as well. I mean, anything you want to know is in there. The tentative schedule for most weeks is in the description box, but I also keep you guys posted and informed through YouTube Shorts every single week as to which schedule changes, if there are any, are coming up, what you can expect, etc., etc. So be sure to watch the shorts, not just the update ones, but the astrology ones. I do a lot of kind of silly, goofy, funny stuff on shorts as well. So be sure to check those out, like them, leave a positive comment, guys. It really does help me, and it helps my channel get out there to more people. It helps me branch out with my brand, with Gemma Jade, and everything that I'm trying to do and accomplish. Guys, if nobody told you today, you're amazing, you are special, and you deserve to have everything you've ever wanted in this world, and you can manifest it with the power of positive thinking and the mind. If you've ever believed anything I've ever said, especially believe that. And even if you feel like you're alone, always remember, I believe in you, I got your back. Always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time.